Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. So, Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion. Surely that makes him the greatest of all time. Well, it is a beautiful morning here in the South Downs, and I'm off for a dog walk, and I thought we should maybe talk around the subject, ask a few questions, look at both sides of the debate, and just see if is he really the greatest of all time? Now, surely the first thing that would make him the greatest of all time is he is a dog lover with his bulldog. Now, sadly, he lost Coco, his bulldog, earlier this year, but Roscoe is still, well, a mega celebrity. He goes everywhere with him. Formula One races on his private jet. And that makes him good in my book. But should we start with the numbers, with the statistics, the things that don't lie? 7-time world champion, more pole positions than anybody else, more podiums than anyone else, more race wins than anyone else, more points in a season than anyone else, more points in a career than anyone else. That's a pretty strong argument. However, I know that if you look in the past, either seasons didn't have as many races or there weren't as many points to be won in races, but you've got to be quite good to be able to knock off all of those results. Now, I know at 7 world championships he's equal with Michael Schumacher, arguably again one of the greatest of all times. But what I would say about that is, for me, I always think Lewis of having 8 championships, because that very first season in 2007 he was going to be the world champion, and then he came into the pits to change the tyre that was basically down to the canvas, lost it on the pit entry and went into a gravel trap, and that was him out of the race, and that was the world championship gone. Now, I think it's safe to say that we've still got time in his career for him to exceed 7 world championships, and I think if he does that, then I think it becomes more and more difficult to certainly say, if he's not the greatest of all time, he's right up there. Come on, Troubles. But Ped, I hear you all cry. But he's in the best car. He's bound to win. Yes, true. If you put any of the top drivers in a car at the back of the grid, they're not going to win. Something like a Haas, they're not going to win the race. But name me a Formula One world champion that wasn't in the best car, or certainly in maybe the best 2 manufacturers. And there's a couple of things here for me. If you look at the beginning of Hamilton's career, when he went into McLaren right in 2007 season, you don't take someone out of a feeder series and stick them in one of the very best cars on the grid unless they have what it takes. And you look at what Hamilton did in that first season, it was sensational. He was on the podium for his first 9 races. Apparently in his 10th race, where he wasn't going to finish on the podium, he actually came on the team radio and asked his team where he needed to take the car, because he'd only ever driven to the bit where you park the podium finishers. He didn't know where to go. But yes, he's always in the best car, and all the top drivers generally are in the best car because the best teams want the best drivers. But there's another thing here, and this is the bit I think I've experienced through my very limited and low quality attempt at motorsport, is that the best cars become the best cars because you've got an amazing team of engineers, but because the driver is part of that process. Drivers in testing and during the race and all of those types of, anytime they're in the car in the simulator, they're giving feedback to the engineers. They're telling the engineers how to make the car work for them. Look at Daniel Ricciardo. He was in Red Bull, the car was perfectly set up for him. He's one of the last of the late breakers, and when he came into Renault, the car just wasn't working for him. But it's starting to be a better car for him because it's time. It takes time to work with your engineers. The other thing I think Lewis has done is he's had longevity in teams. He's only ever driven for 2 teams, and therefore he's got time to build up the team around him and get an understanding with the team and work closely with the team. So I don't think it's any accident that his car's quite good, because he's a great driver. The other thing I guess you can say was, okay, if he's in the best car, the only way you can really judge how good a driver he is by judging him by his teammate. In his first couple of seasons in Formula One, well, the first season he was up against Fernando Alonso, two-time world champion. Again, most people agree one of the most talented drivers on the grid, and he made him look quite ordinary. And then any other he's been up against, Button, Nico Rosberg only managed to win one of the titles when they had the dominant car, and to be honest, he makes Valtteri Bottas look very ordinary. So I think when you look at it in that context, yes, he's in the best car, yes, he's got the best chance of winning, but that doesn't mean you should basically, I don't know, say he's not a great driver because he's in the best car. He's there on merit, and that car is as good as it is. He will be part of that process. Oh, you've always got so much to say for yourself, haven't you? Can't you go on a walk and not Oh really? No more backstats from you. Now at this point, I just want to say I am a huge Lewis Hamilton fan, but I don't idolise the guy. He's certainly not perfect in my book. There are racing drivers that I truly idolise and think are incredible. I'm a huge Jenson Button fan. He can do no wrong in my book. So the next argument against Hamilton being the greatest of all time is often the fact that he's only ever really raced in Formula One, if you exclude the feeder series, karting and those types of things. And that's very true, but I think that says more about the modern day era than anything else. I mean, if you go back in history, you look at someone like Jim Clark, Formula One world champion, went to run in Indy 500, won that. You look at someone like Nigel Mansell, back-to-back Formula One world champion, IndyCar champion. You look at some of even the modern day drivers that have gone and raced at things like Le Mans, with Nico Hülkenberg winning Le Mans. So it's not that that doesn't happen, and look at the attempts of Fernando Alonso in recent years to try and get the Triple Crown. So I don't think it's a case of him not necessarily wanting to do that, although I did see a thing recently where he stated he's not interested in racing at Le Mans, which I find quite interesting. So I think that is, it's harsh criticism, because I think that's more of a statement about the era that we're in than anything else. I'm going to be really interested to see his Extreme E team that he's announced this year that will be racing next year. Extreme E is a series I can't wait for. Basically, are like Baja dune buggies, full electric, and they're going to be racing in parts of the world. They're going to be racing in the ice caps, in the desert, in the forest, to try and raise the profile of environmental concerns and those types of things. And that leads me on to something we'll talk about later with Lewis. Now, Lewis isn't going to be driving the Extreme E car, but he is interested in those other series, and he's a big believer in the W series as well, which is going to be really exciting next year, because W series will be at the same race weekends as some of the Formula One races. So yeah, I think that, you know, in terms of going to other series, his career in F1 isn't finished yet. I don't think we'll see something as incredible as John Surtees, though, the legend that was a world Formula One champion and a world bike champion. I still find that an absolutely amazing feat. Don't be such a bully, you. Come on, Gus. Oh, really? So far then, I'm probably erring on the greatest of all time comment. But the next subject, this is the bit I find really challenging about Lewis Hamilton. What he's like in the car. And what I mean by that is how he behaves in the car when things don't go how he wants them to go. For me, he just moans way too much. He's always on the engineer, on the radio to his engineer, moaning and complaining about strategy and moaning about the car. And for me, he just needs to shut up and get on with it. And I am a Lewis Hamilton fan, but the times when things aren't going his way, I just find it very difficult to warm to him and warm to that approach. He just needs to be far more positive in the car, crack on with it, and if it doesn't go his way, then that's just how it's gone. He just needs to stop moaning so much. So for me, I mean, I'd look at drivers, I don't know, like I've mentioned Daniel Ricciardo already, but like Daniel Ricciardo, those that just crack on, get on with it, attack things with a smile. When they don't go their way, they just learn from it and move on. And I struggle sometimes with Lewis when he's in the car. Now for the subject that probably gets most people's goat. No pun intended there, by the way. What is he like outside of the car? Now, I guess if we think about how his persona has grown since he first entered Formula One, he's become this absolute global megastar. Apparently he's one of the 100 most influential sports people, or people there are on the planet, and I think he wants to use that to do a couple of things. Clearly, outside of the car, he's a big advocate of racial diversity. He's the first black Formula One driver, and I think he quite rightly wants to promote both racial diversity and gender diversity within motorsport, and I take my hat off to him for that. I think it's very, very important, and he behind the scenes does a lot of work trying to promote those things, especially the gender diversity thing, getting more women into motorsport, and he's a big backer of the W Series that I mentioned before. I just think, for me, sometimes the way he does that could be done better, and I think that's probably the people that don't like him, the people that don't agree he's the greatest of all time, probably the way he is outside of the car is one of the main factors for that. The other thing is, you know, he's stated a number of times that he wants to look beyond Formula One. You know, he doesn't just want to, I mean, clearly when he retires he's going to be worth an awful lot of money. He's not going to, you know, retire to his ranch in Colorado and kick back, but he wants to have a career outside of Formula One, whether that's running a race team like Extreme E, the music side of things, the fashion side of things, and I kind of see that, and he doesn't want to kind of follow the mold. I guess we all just wish we could hark back to the days of James Hunt, you know, where sex for breakfast and all of that kind of stuff. But I kind of understand the way Lewis is outside of the car and the way he tries to kind of promote certain things that are important to him. I just think sometimes the way he does it grates people and winds people up the wrong way, and I don't think that helps his overall popularity or his stake as the greatest of all time. Okay, ready for this one? I'm going in. Lewis Hamilton can't be the greatest of all time because he doesn't pay tax in the UK. Yes, that is a reason I have heard aimed at him. He doesn't pay tax in the UK. Now, I just want to, there's a few things here. The first thing is, anybody who has ever asked a tradesperson or accepted a tradesperson doing a job for them for cash so they don't pay VAT, you are not allowed to take part in this argument, because whilst the numbers might be different, the principle is exactly the same. If you're earning multiple £1,000,000 a year and that income is coming from all over the world, just because you grow up in a country doesn't mean to say you have to reside there for the rest of your life. So when Lewis moved to Geneva and then on to Monaco, a lot of people had a go at him because clearly they are tax havens. But Monaco's an interesting one because lots and lots of current and former F1 drivers live in Monaco. There's a real community of drivers in Monaco, and clearly you don't pay tax. But honestly, look me straight in the eye and say, if you were earning, let's say, £1,000,000 a year, and someone gave you the chance to save £500,000 a year in tax by moving to a tax haven, tell me you wouldn't do it. And if you can honestly tell me you wouldn't do it, then carry on in the argument. So yes, he lives in a tax haven, but I do it. I freely admit I do that. I try and, you know, I pay a lot of tax and I contribute to society, but I understand the principle of it. In terms of how much he earns, that's a lot of money, and I know he's in the basis of, or the process of renegotiating his contract for next year, and it's likely that that contract is going to be worth something in the region of maybe 40 to 45 million pounds a year, which is a ridiculous amount of money. Lewis Hamilton earns somewhere in the region, I think just shy of £1 million a week. And that's a lot of money. So I appreciate that that is distasteful to some people. However, come on you two, wait. Excuse me a minute, we've just got some dog issues. Come on now. Incoming. Come on, this way. What were you sniffing? Hey, what were you sniffing? Right, should we carry on? So yeah, it's a lot of money. However, he works with lots of sponsors, and I think that's another thing that wound people up when he was starting to have a go, you know, with on some of the kind of Black Lives Matter stuff. Happen to forget the heritage of some of the brands that he works with, and when he's talking about his green stuff, happens to forget that he's sponsored by a petrochemical company. But you know, hats off to him. You know, make hay while the sun shines. He is, I think, one of them, if not the most, one of the most highly paid sports people in the world. He's a 7-time world champion. He gets in the car week after week and he delivers, and that's why he earns the money he does. And if you look at it in comparison with some of the other drivers on the F1 grid, there's only really Vettel comes close to him. He's on just over 20 million a year. All the other drivers are single figure millions, or some of them are paying to be in Formula 1. So to be a paid driver in Formula 1, actually there aren't that many of them. Such a beautiful, beautiful morning here today. It's quite cold and crisp. I was out on my mountain bike last night in the dark and it was just so beautiful. Anyway, we're nearly coming to the end. I've got 2 more things to put on the table before we can kind of really think about answering my question I posed at the beginning of the video. The next one is consistency. Saw a really interesting video this week on Autosport's YouTube channel with Paddy Lowe. And Paddy Lowe's clearly worked with Lewis a long time. Or he doesn't work with him anymore. But in Paddy Lowe's opinion, one of the things that makes Lewis so great is how consistent he is. 14 years at the top of his game. He may well be in the best car, but you still have to not make mistakes. You still have to go through a race weekend. You have to get the car set up well on Friday practice. You have to qualify at the front of the field without making any mistakes. And then in race, the race day, you really have to go through and just not make any mistakes. And I think the race last week in Turkey was just a brilliant example of that. Lots of good drivers made mistakes. Max Verstappen, amazing driver, ultimate talent, one of the most exciting drivers to watch. You can see it though. He starts getting excited and starts getting impatient, and then makes mistakes. And that's what he did. He made a mistake. He tried to get past the car, span off, spectacular as it was, but made a mistake. And don't get me wrong, Lewis has made mistakes in the past, but over his career of 14 years, he makes very few mistakes. And that's why he's as good as he is. Yes, he may well be in the best car, but unless you're in the best car and don't make any mistakes, and we've all done it. Now, I'll give you a simple example. You go go-karting in one of these endurance go-kart things. If you want to win, the simple rule is don't spin off, don't make a mistake. And it's so easy to do. Imagine now you're in a 1,000 horsepower Formula 1 car, driving in the rain on a surface that's basically an ice rink, on slick tyres. And now don't make any mistakes. And now tell me he's not one of the greatest drivers of all time. There you go. I just think that's, you know, consistency is everything. So, do I think he's the greatest of all time? Honestly, I think it's impossible to answer that question. I don't think you can easily compare drivers from one era to another. You look back in the history books at people like Fangio and Moss. Great driver, Stirling Moss, never won a world championship because he always wanted to drive in a British car. You look at amazing drivers that never really got the long-term success through death or injury. Gilles Villeneuve, Ronnie Peterson, and then you come through Ayrton Senna. Clearly Ayrton Senna, for me, Ayrton Senna, one of the most stunning, amazing drivers there's ever been. I think he did amazing things in the car. Interestingly, I was never a big fan of Ayrton when he was actually racing it. I think it's only since we lost him and you look back at the footage and the way he was and the things he did in the car were incredible. Michael Schumacher, 7-time world champion, incredible racing driver. Maybe a nicer guy out the car than in. I don't agree with some of the things he did on circuit. I think some of the tactics he pulled off on circuit, in fact actually Senna did exactly the same thing, but an amazing driver and certainly up there. Sebastian Vettel, you know, a 4-time world champion. I do think, as it happens with Vettel, that was definitely a case of being in the best car. I'm not a massive Vettel fan. If you look at what's happened since he's left Red Bull, gone to Ferrari, the best team, you know, one of the best teams out there, and been pretty average, to be honest. So I don't think you can necessarily say whether someone's the greatest of all time. For me, though, I think the history books will look back at someone who was very special, and I think we should appreciate that we have special in our midst. We watch Grand Prix and we watch one of the greatest drivers that there is likely to ever be, and we're watching him make history, and from now on he's broken all the records, so now on it's a case of adding to those records, and I think that's special times, and I think we should give him a little bit more credit. Yes, he's not perfect. Yes, he, you know, people don't like him because he's got a voice outside the car or he doesn't pay tax. Yes, he moans too much in the car. But I think it's difficult to say that he's not one of the greatest. I'm going to leave the video with maybe the most contentious question of all. Should it be a rise Sir Lewis Hamilton in the New Year's honours list? Should this country bestow one of the greatest honours on him? We've done it in the past with active sports people. Chris Hoy, 6-time Olympic champion, was made a knight while he was still competing. Bradley Wiggins won the Tour de France and was made a knight. And I know there are, you know, people say, well, sports people, what do they really do? Well, it's about being an ambassador for the country or a role model for the country. And Lewis Hamilton's right up there for me. And I think if he's not knighted in the New Year's honours list, I think that's poor form. It may well be there waiting for him to get 8 world titles, and in which case he will. But you know, you look at other sports people. You know, we've got a Brit that's smashing out the British Superbikes, 5 times champion. Arguably, maybe he's not getting the press. He's not as well known as Lewis, but maybe he should be knighted as well. So I don't know. I think that one probably is very contentious whether he should be knighted. But as an ambassador for this country, I'm proud to have Lewis Hamilton there. I think he needs to wind it in a bit sometimes, but just let the car do the talking, Lewis. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think. Put it in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think he's the greatest? What do you like about him? What do you dislike about him? I put a post on Instagram the day he won the title and it got so much traction. I thought, I need to talk about this on a dog walk video. But maybe we should all just be thankful he's a dog fan and he takes his dog everywhere and loves the dog to pieces. Roscoe, the Petrol pup and the Petrol pooch are big fans, my friend. Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have done so, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. And I'll see you on the next film. But you take care. Drive safe.